Welcome to another edition of Learning to See, Seeing to Learn with Dr. Patrick Quaid and Cari Fairley. Dr. Quaid is the founder of the View Cubed Vision Therapy Centers. They're located in Guelph and North York, Ontario. Cari was a teacher for more than 30 years in Ontario as well, in 3 different school boards. Now recently retired. Congratulations, Cari.
Thank you.
Cari, as we think about parents working in partnership with teachers, such an important relationship when students are struggling particularly, but for all teachers and all parents, what are the kinds of things that teachers use as strategies to help students succeed? And what are the kinds of experiences you get into with parents as they're struggling with encouraging and challenging their students who are not having an easy time of it?
That's very, very true, because the parents often take it upon themselves that they're not a good parent because their child is not doing very well in school. I have sat for hours with, moms and dads in tears because I'm trying to explain to them how the educational system works, how, maybe their child is struggling in certain areas, but to get across, and sometimes it can be a cultural thing too, that different cultures are really pushing their kids to be, we all want our children to be successful, but with that I've had to sit parents down and just say, your child is really working hard, your child is really trying. Don't punish them at home. Don't do this because they didn't get a very good mark on their spelling test. That there's other issues going on here. And we talk about the behavior and we talk about that, but you have to have that relationship with the children in the classroom and with the parents. This is a team effort. And I've had principals who say to me that the parents are sending their best. They're not sending their worst. This is the best of them, the child that they're sending to school. And so often they do take it very, very personally if the child is not succeeding, or they want their child to succeed more than they did perhaps in school. And often it's very much of a building self-esteem within the children and within the parents to say, we're in this together, we're going to get through this, we're going to make progress, but let's find out what's going on. I had one parent who completely refused to acknowledge that there was a problem in school, that, just trying to get them to agree to some of the extra support systems that we had within the school was a real challenge. It wasn't until I really sat down with her and made that relationship with her and had a good talk with her and said, we want to see what's going on. Let's get him tested. Let's find out, what we can do to help. That made a huge difference. And I've had many parents write me notes at the end of the year thanking me that I persisted in trying to get them this extra help, find out what's really going on.
Dr. Quaid, perhaps you can give us some insight on this as you're dealing with children who have been identified as having struggles, and looking through your work at the clinic to improve their futures and improve their immediate experiences, along with the parents who are there trying to support and encourage them.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important there called self-esteem. And I think, speaking from my own experience and what motivated me to write the book was something that I personally went through. I mean, around age 8, I was in a car accident, and I sustained a concussion and I had eye teaming issues. And so I kind of had the blessing or curse, depending on how you look at it, of, having a normally functioning visual system prior, and then went to a very abnormally functioning visual system, in addition to developing a speech issue. So you can imagine being 8, having to speak in front of a class and having developed a stammer from a concussion. So what was interesting to me was, this is where I'll praise the educators, because I can name 2 teachers in my life that made a massive difference, and both of them exhibited the same quality. They tried to figure out what was going on rather than labeling me as not trying hard enough. And I think when that message goes back to parents, then the parents start to dig and start to go, okay, there's something else going on here. And I think my own personal experience after I had my issue dealt with, I remember the day I sat in the chair, I went through 15 eye doctors. And on the 16th eye doctor, he holds something in front of me and says, have a look at the stick here for a second. And I just said, which one? He's like, what do you mean? Well, I see two. There's one here and one here. And he turns around to my mom and says, and you're wondering why you can't read. And for me, it was like, this guy just walked on water to me, because I'm like, you just explained 2.5 years of my life where I had to read with my head tilted because I had to use my nose to block one eye, because if I kept my head straight, everything went double. Like, they thought it was my neck for about a year. It wasn't my neck. I was turning my head because I was seeing two and I could use my nose to block one eye. So that's why I was tilting my head. So having a really good group of healthcare professionals, but also having those people connected with the educators, because I really feel the two educators I had that made a massive difference spotted the problem. They weren't healthcare professionals, nor did they pretend to be healthcare professionals, but they knew there was a problem. And they said, there's something going on that ain't right. And they connected with my parents, and my parents weren't going to say, no, my kid's perfect. Don't talk about my kid like they're not perfect. There was a very honest discussion to say, hey, we want Patrick to reach his maximum potential. I'm pretty sure you do as well. Let's just sit down and try to work it out. And Cari, maybe you can comment on this, but I think some teachers are timid about having that conversation with parents, or vice versa. And I think that's a really important conversation to have, because if that didn't occur, I don't think I would be where I am.
I totally agree. You really have to be willing to say as a teacher, you have to be willing to be humble and say to the parent, I see a pattern here, but I don't know what it is. We need to get more help. And unfortunately, there are some parents who will say, my child is perfect, don't tell me, or they're not like that at home. I hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. But it's dealing with what they're doing in school is really, you do want to make them successful. You do want to help them. And as a teacher, you have to put your pride aside and really put yourself empathetically into the hearts of those parents and those kids. And it's the kids that are evacuating the rooms and throwing the things on the floor. It's like, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. Because you're a really great kid. What can I do? And the same with the parents, to say, I'm on your side. We're going to figure this out. Let's talk to some professionals who know more than I do at this moment.
Yeah, and I think what's really important too. I mean, I know I've got a colleague, Elena Skowski, who wrote a great book about certain addiction tendencies in kids, like, for example, online gaming, and you can talk about any addiction. You can talk about alcohol, you can talk about drugs, whatever you want. But any type of addiction is usually an escapist behavior. I'm trying to get away from something in reality that I can't handle. And what I've noticed, like, when I go back in time about, the place that I was, when you mentioned, I'm starting to get convinced that I'm stupid. I mean, I was at that stage when I was 2 years post-injury after the concussion. I really started to think, like, maybe it's not the head injury. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just stupid. And once you start to lose that inner spark, that inner flame. I mean, Grant knows I love quoting Irish poets. I mean, in Ireland, if you don't play a musical instrument or you can't quote poetry, you're considered disabled, right? It's just a thing, right? So W.B. Yeats said, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And to me, it's I couldn't agree more. Yeah. You want to inspire children to do what excites them. You want them to feel good about themselves as a person. They may not know what they want to be, but they know what they're passionate about. And I think once you find out where their passion is and you maximize their ability, that kid will thrive. I mean, show me a kid that doesn't like to show off at what they're good at. Yeah. And I think trying to make a kid realize that, if you're struggling with reading and writing and spelling, that's heavily involved in visual and hearing. And we got to make sure to get that stuff assessed and make sure that there's not something unfair holding you back. And I think that's really important to preserve the self-confidence and make sure that these kids stay happy in themselves. And I'm a 42-year-old male, and I'll tell you, most of us only start getting comfortable in our skin probably in our late 30s, early 40s. Or maybe I'm a slow learner in Irish. I don't know. But, to me, it's really important to get comfortable in your own skin and say, okay, I know who I am and I know what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about. And I'm not going to be rude about it, but I'm also not going to let people, tell me that I'm stupid or tell me that I can't do something. And I think we really have to preserve that self-confidence of these kids. That's really, really, really key.
Yeah. And even if I had a child that needed to be taken out of a group, because, the kids have to be in groups, I mean, not with COVID now, but before, to have them on their own in a corner, I would make it perfectly clear this was not a punishment. This was not because of behavioral. This just might be the best way that you learn.
Yep.
Because I am very much of a I need to be quiet. I need to focus. I don't want all those distractions. And I can identify with that within other children.
Well, actually, a really good point, because if somebody has a vision problem and they by default are forced to become an auditory learner, some people are naturally an auditory learner, and that's fine as long as their visual skills aren't deficient. But somebody who's got a vision problem who is forced into auditory learning, to your point exactly, they're going to be very sensitive to background noise. So if they're taking a test or something, any sort of noise going on in the background is going to majorly affect them more than a kid who's a visual learner. So to your point, it's really important to explain that to a kid and say, hey, yeah, this is not a punishment. This is not to make you feel bad or exclude you from your peer group. I'm setting you up for success here, not for failure.
Exactly. I'm setting you up for success.
Right.
And that's like it. And I from day one would get across to the kids that everyone learns differently.
Right.
And I'm going to find how you learn best, and I'm going to make that work for you.
Well, that's the thing. You actually get to change your life, right?
You do. And that's so exciting in education, because we got to know him and what he needed. And he couldn't stand, he's probably would benefit from your therapy. He needed to be alone. He needed to be on his own. He wanted to be on his own. So I didn't force him into a group. And he wasn't trying to be mean or rude or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was exactly one of the most intelligent kids that I probably ever taught. So verbal, so good. And a lot of times he needed to be kinesthetic. He needed to be touching and doing. And I've had kids that would sit there and draw pictures in the middle of a lesson because it helped them concentrate. So it's like, you have to be willing to step outside that teacher box that everybody thinks that a student has to be like this.
Yeah. And I think I think we're trying to teach, 21st century kids with a 20th century education model. And I think we need to evolve beyond that. And I think most of the teachers I talk to agree with that. In fact, teaching is an extremely important profession. Even my wife says from Turkey, she said the two people who are the most revered in Turkey are doctors and teachers.
Wow.
And I think rightly so, because, the teachers are, the two most important people for the child's education are the parents and the teacher. And it's a partnership. It's not, the parents saying, well, the school's taking care of the education. You got to take that on at home. But the teacher is a critical partner in that relationship. And I think it's really important that teachers continue to be properly educated on these types of topics and be equipped with the tools so that they can also be successful. Because I can imagine being a teacher and not being empowered with these tools, and you're seeing these issues in the classroom. It's got to be frustrating knowing that there's got to be something more we can do.
Yes. And seeing the patterns evolve. And when I met you, and we discussed, your theories and the things that you've discussed in the book, it was like, that's the missing piece. That was this.
Yes.
It was like, yes, finally, I got it.
And when you made that motion of there's something going on here, I'm like, yeah, that's visual processing. We need to delve into that and see what's going on. So
and then the puzzle kind of all came together, and I could pinpoint the students in my class that fit that, what they were struggling with. And it also makes a huge difference to their self-esteem to realize, honey, it's not you. I know how hard you're trying.
Yeah.
It's the way your brain is working right now. And we're going to train your brain. We're going to work with you on this.
I think that's why.
And then they feel like it's not their fault.
Yes. And that's why in the book, we also put in some questionnaires so parents can kind of go through those questions with their kids and figure out, okay, is this a problem, or is this something that's probably not a component? Because again, not all learning issues are visual, but boy, when vision's involved, it's like a monkey wrench in the machine. It really,
literacy is part of every part of school. It's part of life, but it is so, I mean, as teachers back in my day, way back, it used to be, well, if the child can't write it down, then they don't know the information. And I discovered through my career that that is not true.
No. And a very short story. My dad, he was an uncorrected +8 prescription until he was 10 years old. So basically, he could see far away, but up close, it was like, holy, I cannot see up close. So he didn't get his first pair of glasses till 10 years old. So forget about eye teaming skills. It's just glasses. But he remembers having a book in front of him, and the teacher would get his head and push it into the book because he kept on trying to pull back. So, and yet my dad spent half his life in the army. He built half of our house with his hands. I mean, if the test tomorrow was to build an extension onto a house, I would get an F and he would get an A+. So what's the definition of intelligence, right? So I think we really need to look at that.
Yes, and that feeds into the self-esteem.
Well, this has been great. Thank you both for your contributions, some ideas here. There's so much more to learn about all of this from not only Dr. Quaid, but also Cari and the other contributors who've made this book something that's a great resource for both parents and teachers and other professionals who are looking at how children learn and the impact of that on their future careers, on their self-esteem, on their happiness, on their success in life. We've been talking to Cari Fairley, a retired teacher in Ontario, and Dr. Patrick Quaid, the author of the book, Learning to See, Seeing to Learn. Join us again for another episode when we come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.